that game on Saturday, I felt very bad for anyone who went to that game. There was probably a lot of people who went there. I always feel bad, especially people who like either it's like a big like birthday or something like that, or if it's someone who like
Yes.
it's their first like hockey game. If that's your first hockey game, like you may not ever come back, which is like that's
I
really
wouldn't blame you.
unfortunate.
And welcome into the Bruins Beat on CLNS Media. My name is Evan Marinofsky, and we are sponsored by FanDuel and HelloFresh. That is Connor Ryan. Connor, what is up?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing all right. I've done better. I'm sick. Last week, I think you were really sick, and I think you gave something to me through the computer,
Through the mic.
Boy, oh
Sorry.
boy, yeah, through the mic. It transferred. Technology's crazy these days. It's just that's how it must have happened.
I mean, Evan, I was gonna say I feel sick because I didn't get a certain Dunking. I would actually rather say tracksuit. I had it on my phone, had it in the cot, ready to go. But you know what, Evan? I had a job to do. I was at the Bruins locker room. Certain Brad Marchand was speaking about stuff like 1000th game legacy. I wasn't gonna be like, sorry, Brad, got to order this tracksuit. I gotta.
I think the Dunking tracksuit comes before Brad Marchand's 1000th game. I think.
Listen,
That's just me.
We have a job to do, so I took part in that scrum. Head on a swivel back to the phone. It's all sold out.
That's
Kicking the
brutal.
balls, if you ask me. But
Well, they tweeted at you finally. I mean, you know what's interesting? So for those who don't know, Duncan tweeted back at Connor yesterday or on Super Bowl Sunday. It was a legendary moment. It's a moment that's been too long in the making, I think. It should have happened a long time ago. And there are some jabronis who get dunk sponsorships. Lots of people who are not deserving. No offense to them, but they're not. Or at least they're not as deserving as you are. And the fact that you finally got that acknowledgement, I think, is at least a step in the right direction.
You would imagine. You would think so, Evan. Yeah. The fact that, still get shot of the tracksuit. Who knows? Maybe I got to switch to Cafe Nero or some shit. I don't know. We'll see.
Cafe Nero. Yeah, that would be interesting. But yeah, so that was it. I got to say, I have been under the weather for like a day now. Part of it was Super Bowl. I got home. There were two people in my house to watch the game. I'm just like, can you all just get out? But nevertheless, they were there. But the Duncan thing with you and them, that kept me going. That was like my North Star. It gave me the energy I needed.
I'm happy to help, Evan.
So I was happy that happened. I'll actually not be at the Beanpot. I know this will come out after the Beanpot. I will not be there. You will be there. Are you? It's a big championship game. Pretty big. BU's got to show up. Unlike me, they got to show up. So
it is a big game, Evan. Again, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. I think last week it was me declaring outright that BU was going to beat BC. I think we all knew that was going to happen. That BC team is kind of, a little bit of a pretty beat. No, that's a very good BC team. I'll give them some credit. But regardless, I don't put down any expectations, any sweeping declarations over a Beanpot championship. I have run into many miscues in my life by making very declarative statements about hockey championship games on the TD Garden ice. Be that make of that what you will in terms of what level of competition.
I think you and I have had similar. I think you and I have had similar predictions about similar games. When it comes to the Bruins, at least.
But yeah, and also a certain collegiate hockey program. Arguably, one would say the best collegiate hockey program in the United States, in the world. But they've also had a few rough title games on the TD Garden ice. So I won't say anything. Northeastern, yes, they've started off kind of slow. Getting hot at the right time, though. Beat BU just a few weeks ago. So should be a tough game. And if the Terriers happen to win, next time we record, I will be very humble, very gracious. Won't have any scarlet on me at all. Should be happy to talk about a good game of hockey.
That's how it should be. I agree with you. Yeah, I will not be there, but good luck to both teams. I don't have a team in the race, so it doesn't really matter. Bruins. That's what we are. We're a Bruins podcast. They played on Saturday, and ooh boy, talk about being sick, a stinker, a bat. Oh, what a waste of time that was. 3-0 loss to Washington on home ice. Now it's 2 of 3 that the Bruins have had that have been pretty bad. Obviously, the Calgary one, then the Vancouver win in the middle, then back to the Calgary ways against Washington. But I haven't remembered a game like that on Saturday where it was just nothing. Just nothing. Like, just not even a little spark of something. I just
Yeah. I mean, I think you look at it right. I probably would rather talk about the Duncan tracksuits again, if you want me to be honest, Evan. I'd rather talk more about that than
I would
actually,
also rather. I would way rather talk about
but
that.
alas, I think when you look at the fact that what were we talking about last week, that game on Tuesday against Calgary was probably like one of the low points in terms of a game at the Garden this year, especially. Not a lot going on. Crowd didn't get into it. Not a lot to cheer for. Like, all right, that's probably the low point, right? For at least a game on over at the Garden. That game on Saturday, I felt very bad for anyone who went to that game. There was probably a lot of people who went there. I always feel bad, especially people who like either it's like a big like birthday or something like that, or if it's someone who like it's their first like hockey game. If that's your first hockey game, like you may not ever fucking come back. Which is like that's
I
really
wouldn't blame
unfortunate.
you.
It's really unfortunate because my God, it is a fantastic game. But man, that game, it was just like. And on Monday when we spoke to Jim Montgomery about it, of like, all right, looking at the tape again, like anything else you notice, he's like, we were just like slow, like we just didn't do anything, which is like accurate. And it's one of those things where you look at, they were like skating molasses, right? Like they were beat to every loose puck, like they weren't. Letting pucks get by them, ruining whatever limited chances they had of ozone time. I feel like you could count like on your fingers how many seconds that team had of ozone time against like Lindgren in that game. Like there was nothing happening at all. You had like little spurts there where you thought maybe they could get back into it with the power play chances. They had 3 power play chances in the third period. Had all the makings of like, all right, this team's been outshot 23-8 after the first 40 minutes. They're still going to find a way to, at least get a point out of this game. You flush it and you go from there. Just kept on getting worse. Just a lot of no-shows all across the board, right? Like other than maybe Jeremy Swayman, who kept, them in the game early on, up and down through the lineup, no lineup switcheroo or anything like that, I think would have sparked this team. It was just flat all around. Like that was brutal, and they got booed off the ice, and it was probably it was warranted because my God, there was nothing to write home about it from that game that was positive in any way you want to frame it.
I always feel for the fans who go to those kinds of games who like live in, Vermont or New Hampshire or Maine or, somewhere that isn't within an hour of here. And it's like, all right, it's a big thing. We're going to go down. It's a Saturday. We're going to make a day of it. Like that's the one game a year we're going to go to. Because Bruins games are fucking expensive. I mean, like I was looking at ticket prices. Ironically enough, that the game tonight, Tuesday, against the Lightning is like the cheapest for balcony seats on Ticketmaster for a long time. Like the ticket prices are exorbitant through the rest of the season. And a lot of people are only going to go to a game a year. And when that's the one game you go to, that sucks because that was a garbage game. And I think there's a bigger takeaway from this than just, it's one game. Because I think there's a little bit more below the surface, I think. And Kevin Paul DuPont astutely pointed this out.
Well
astutely,
said,
yes. Big words today. But before we do that, a quick word, Connor, from our sponsor.
The NFL season is wrapping up, but there is still time to get on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays, find bets in the new Explore tab, Make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays and more. So visit FanDuel.com/Boston and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
So, your partner, your coworker, Kevin Pont, wrote a story on Saturday about kind of what this shows, what that loss showed. And he said, quote, Montgomery said, they were physical. They were right on top of us. When we've struggled this year against teams have tended to be physical, play a hard man-on-man everywhere. Winnipeg did it to us. Minnesota did it to us. Calgary did it to us. And Kevin Paul DuPont goes on to write, Milan Lucic was added over the summer, part of Don Sweeney's $1 million per player supermarket sweep in free agency. Luch was brought on to be that emotional trigger guy, possibly with a side of brute force if situations merited. Obviously, then Dupes goes into what happened with Lucic. I don't think I need to go back through all that. He said, here's what they know. They find that generally can score enough to win, backed by excellent goaltending. Lots of teams don't have that. But it's not a team that engenders confidence that it has the strength, will, temerity to push back on clubs that arrive at the rink ready to muscle the ball, scrap after pucks as if they're willing to break your leg, to use Montgomery's term from Saturday's postgame news conference. Playoff hockey at its core is a very nasty business. It's why many of us still love it. Its inherent sweet menace with accompanying, though diminishing, threat of mayhem is what keeps us from running to the fridge when the puck's in play in April, May, and June. He's right. He's right. That's a lot of words, by the way. That's a hell of a way to say what he just said. I think he's right in the sense that toughness, that physicality that we've talked about, they don't really have right now. And we've discussed this a little bit, but I think games like Saturday where you could kind of use that, especially against a team like Washington that's fighting to get into the playoffs, that's got something to prove. I don't know. I think that is... It's becoming more prevalent that they should look at this come the deadline.
Yeah, because I think it's one of those things too where it's. I think even like in that story, Dupes mentions like guys that on defense like Ilya Lyubushkin, who's again like a third pairing like physical guy, lands a lot of hits. But it's not like you're like, all right, we need toughness. Let's get just like Liam O'Brien, who just beats the shit out of everyone, who will just like, drop the gloves or anything like that. And I think what the Bruins need is just more guys that can, set the tone when needed, right? I think that's the biggest thing. And it's not just the fact that I think it all has to rely on a guy you pick up at the deadline. Like you can get a guy like Brendan Duhaime from Minnesota who feels like he gets, 7 or 8 hits every single game. And that will help, of course, but also you just see more other guys stepping up. And again, sometimes all it is about delivering just that one hit or just being, aggressive on the forecheck. Like I even look at last year in the playoffs where the Bruins had so much trouble against Florida and how aggressive their forecheck was. And yes, the guys like Matthew Tkachuk, the guys on their defense like Radko Gudas or, Lomberg or those guys further down the lineup. But like, I look at like Sam Bennett in that series. That dude was a fucking wrecking ball.
Menace.
He came back in. And like, is that like necessarily what like Sam Bennett's like bread and butter is necessarily known for? I mean, like maybe he's evolved into that kind of player. I thought he was just like a very solid like middle six guy. I didn't realize what he was going to do in that. But I think when you get to the playoffs, you have to elevate and maybe even augment your game a little bit to put your team in the best position to win. And I think a guy like Sam Bennett did that. I mean, he comes back and kind of changed a lot of the complexion of that game. They play Carolina. He absolutely wallops. Who was it? Jacob Slavin, where he sent him to another friggin' dimension, right?
That's right.
And again, that doesn't mean like, all right, we need like Charlie Coyle to be like bodying like a top 4 guy or something like that. But when it's all I think about the buy-in and getting guys ready for the playoffs and what is going to be required. It's not always fun to be, hitting everyone a mile a minute, but if it, leads to wearing the other team down, if it leads to miscues with the puck, forced passes, lapses in transition play, it all pays off in the end, right? If it leads to you getting a win, winning around, moving ahead, surviving and advancing, all those things. So I do think it's very obvious, whether it's on D with a guy like Lyubushkin or one of the many other third pairing guys, maybe a fourth line stalwart. We've mentioned guys like Duhaime, Maroon, all of them as well. But it also has come from within, right? Like, I don't think one, like, let's say like last year, the Bruins, all they got was a guy like Garnet Hathaway. It helps. But like, if you had like a Garnet Hathaway to this team, it's not like that impact isn't making everyone else buying it. Like, oh fuck, we have to jump in and play.
One guy's not going to change the identity.
Exactly. I think it has to be a lot of buy-in from other guys, and maybe that changes when you get to the playoffs. And again, like the stakes are raised, and you realize you do have to change your game around a little bit. But yeah, it can't just fall on whoever you're maybe able to pick up at the deadline, depending on who even is out there. Because I don't know, you Evan, as is the case every year, these like fourth line guys, third pairing, D zone kind of players, they tend to go for a pretty big premium once you get to this time of the year because a whole lot of teams covet them around this time of year.
It's crazy how that works. But I agree with you. I and again, I get that Saturday's game's one game, right? It's an early February game against the Capitals at 1:00 on a Saturday. It's not prime time. I know it was on ABC, but it's one game. I get that. But it has become a little bit of a trend throughout this year and even going back into previous years of them being a little soft. And I think it kind of has to be addressed, especially when it comes time for the postseason where you're playing against one team. I think it's pretty out there that the Bruins' weakness are these types of things, which is very interesting because for so many years, the Bruins were kind of the aggressor. They were the tough team. They were the team that exploited other teams who were a little more skill or speed-based or whatnot. And I also I agree with you. I think the Bruins have the personnel to be tougher, to be harder on teams. They have size. That like they have that. They have guys like Frederick and Coyle's a big guy and Marchand plays with an edge and McAvoy can certainly do. Like you have guys. It's just that buy-in and can you just start that up in the playoffs and go from there? I don't know. I do think and that's why I wouldn't mind going out and getting like one or two depth pieces who kind of have that snarl to them, so to speak. But anyways, before we continue our conversation, Connor, another quick word from our sponsor. Quick break in the action to tell you about our delicious friends over at HelloFresh. With HelloFresh, you get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. A crazy schedule can make it easy to fall back into your dinner time recipe rut, but keep mealtime exciting with over 40 recipes to choose from every week. There's always something delicious to discover with HelloFresh. Turn to HelloFresh Market for yummy add-ons and enjoy the season's limited time fall flavors lineup. It's that time of year, right? Things get you in the mood, like apple cider cake with caramel sauce. All the ingredients come fresh, from the crushed tomatoes to the Italian chicken sausage mix to the Parmesan cheese. It's delicious, and I feel like a chef when I'm doing it. What's better than that? And this is a busy time of year for me with hockey starting up. I don't always have a ton of time, so this recipe makes it quick to enjoy something amazing. So join in on the fun. Go to HelloFresh.com/50Bruins and use code 50Bruins for 50% off plus free shipping. Again, go to HelloFresh.com/50Bruins and use code 50Bruins for 50% off plus free shipping. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. Now, back to the show. So, Tuesday, onto better things than the team's flaws. One of the team's big positives, Brad Marchand, 1,000 games. Going to hit 1,000 games on Tuesday against the Tampa Bay Lightning. We've talked this year about Marchand's value. You and I think it was a recent Poke the Bear. We discussed just how good he's been this year and how he's been underrated and his point production and coming back from double hip surgery. And I want to go bigger picture. When you think of Brad Marchand, what do you think is the moment or some of the moments that you remember with him? Like, what are the memorable Brad Marchand moments? Because I have one. There's a bunch. But I think one of the big ones is that goal against Vancouver, shorthanded in Game 3, where I'm sorry, but I think that might be his most memorable moment because that was as that completely shifted the momentum of that series. That was iconic. His celly, just dangling through guys. Like, I think that might be his most memorable moment. You can go with like licking Ryan Callahan's face, and you can go with like the dirty shit. But I'm saying, like, how good of a player he's been, I feel like that's still, even 13 years later, I still think that might be number one. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, what I think is so unique about Brad Marchand, and I kind of wrote about this today, is that I think when you look at his legacy, and he even talked on Monday about the Hockey Hall of Fame, whether he thinks he could make it there, and he's like, that's a goal of mine. Jim Montgomery said like he thinks he definitely is a Hall of Famer. Again, maybe we'll have that discussion another week or something when we look back at his legacy and maybe where exactly he lands. But when you look at like what's his defining moment, this is a guy that you can look, I'm sure in Boston, you view him as just an all-time Bruin, obviously, for his contributions. As you said, probably the thing that comes to mind for me is that 2011 shorthanded goal, because it's like fighting through all these players, these elite level talent, in the moment with that crowd going, the skill involved, the will, determination. I feel like that kind of encompasses everything you see in what Brad Marchand has provided this team over the years. But you ask like people here what the best moment is, they'll bring up stuff like that. You ask people outside of this market, it's like the amount of discourse of what is the prevailing thought. Like, what is the one image? Is it him like lifting the cup, celebrating? Is it him with Patrice Bergeron, learning under him as kind of the second in command for all these years? Is it, the stuff, outside of the rink where he's been so involved in the community? Is it, a guy like him who I think if you don't follow along very much, you can view Marchand as being like, whatever, I don't give a fuck what people think about me. But like, if you, I think, listen to him and, the comments he's had about, assessing his own legacy. And he had that conversation with Bruce Cassidy after the Ryan Callahan thing of like, how do you want to be remembered? And I think that's something that does mean a lot to him, right? Those things all show that he's a not complicated person, but what that legacy is of just how much it kind of stretches and how many different lenses you can view it through, right? There's a lot of people, I'm sure, who like, what do they think of? It's like him slew footing Sammy Salo or punching, Daniel Sedin, or licking Ryan Callahan, or, hitting Tristan Jarry with a right hook. Like that's
right.
I mean, listen, that's part of it. Like that's part of that
100%.
career. Like, he's the most suspended player in NHL history. Like that label, there's people who are still gonna have, wearing Maple Leafs jerseys, going to be cursing him 30 years down the road, right? But I think it shows why he's such a unique player, is that you have that part of it. You have the, him as a superstar, him as a captain now, but just that evolution along the way of being this player that I don't think anyone, even if you were a Marchand fan in 2011, loving what he was doing, if you ask them like, all right, in 13 years, he's going to be wearing the C, and he's probably on the cusp of, getting enshrined into the Hall of Fame.
Be like,
do you
what?
believe them? Yeah, exactly.
What are you talking about?
And again, it just shows you just like how wide, spanning I think that kind of career and that legacy is. And I think there's very few NHLers who, one, can hit that level of recognition, but also be so divisive, but for so many different markets, and so many people I think have like validity added to as to why they think that way as well, right? It's like a really fascinating to see how it all kind of shapes up in that regard.
The word you just used, fascinating. I mean, I think there's a real case that he has one of the most fascinating careers of this era of NHL players.
Yep.
In terms of how he entered the league, his reputation, suspensions. I mean, but prior to suspensions, I mean, you think about that series against Vancouver, right? We mentioned the shorthanded goal, but there were the little plays. I mean, punching the Sedins in the face, and, table topping. Who was the defenseman from Vancouver that he table top behind the net in that series that started a brawl? I forget who it was. It was like either Ballard or one of those guys.
Yeah.
He was the perfect medicine to break that Vancouver team. That was a skilled, soft Vancouver team that he was the absolute perfect guy to just crumble them up. I mean, just lived in their heads, and he still does. But I mean, that was kind of his coming out party. And then you have the suspensions along the way and the consistent production, but it was just regular fine production. That's great. Top 6 forward in the NHL, which is swell, especially for a guy like him. But the suspensions continue, and then he gets to the late 2010s where those numbers start to just skyrocket, and those suspensions start and those dumb plays start to go down. They don't go away completely. He still gets penalized a lot. He still has his occasional brain farts, but the production goes way up. And you also have people are going to be mad about me bringing this up, but the 2019 Game 7 play where he gets off the ice on the Pietrangelo goal. He has a very interesting legacy, and I think it's an overall very good one. I think when the time comes, I'm not a Hall of Fame expert. I haven't fully dived into it, but I do think he has a legitimate case for the Hall of Fame. I just think it's a fascinating arc. He's had a crazy arc. I mean, if you were to make a Netflix series around a player in the NHL, I think he might be the guy you'd pick because it's just so up and down. But it continues. It's like it keeps rising, along the way he was like a stock. There were setbacks, but then the comeback, and then boom, and now it just seems to be rising. But I do think if I were to make a Netflix series around one NHL player from this generation, I think it'd be him because I just think he's had that kind of career. And again, we said it last week. It doesn't seem to be stopping anytime soon because he still looks great. He's played great and has embraced the leadership role that he's gotten. And I commend him for it. So I'm happy to see him hit 1,000 games for sure. Do you have another NHL? When I mentioned the Netflix series thing, it's an interesting discussion. Are there any other NHL players you'd want to see as a Netflix series?
Wow,
it's a good. This is a question we should be doing during the summer.
I'd want to watch one of those shows like House Hunters, but it's them doing home inspections, but it's just Derek Forbert looking at really shitty elevators and why he can't fix them. That dude, I think, has been plagued by faulty elevator. That's what I would have been more placing people in those certain situations as opposed to following career. I mean, there's so many different guys who've got wild careers. Even Robin Leonard with the thing with also didn't he buy a truckload of snakes or something? He tried to have a reptile collection or something like that.
Wild.
Yeah, there's all this. I mean, but there's many players who have very interesting stories like that. So. You can craft, I think, many different. Maybe.
Yes.
Maybe Netflix should do that instead of covering the Red Sox this whole year because I don't know how many storylines you're going to get out of that. But that'll be mine though. Home inspection with Derek Forbert and Darla. So
I think that could work. I agree with you. The Marchand thing is more in terms of just a good story. A guy you're watching someone evolve and have setbacks, and I think it'd be an interesting one because he's famous for that. I do wonder if the NHL ever tries to do a quarterbacks documentary. Isn't Jason Tatum doing something with the NBA?
I think so, yeah. I believe that's right.
I mean, granted, the Bruins have Behind the B.
which is very good.
Which is a great show. I'm not demeaning it. I love Behind the B. I think they do a great job with it. But I would wonder if the NHL, because not every team has a Behind the B. And Behind the B is also done through the Bruins.
Yes.
I would be curious if the NHL is ever open to a Netflix style documentary behind the scenes, someone's day in the life, things like that. But who knows? I think it'd be interesting. Maybe this is our idea. We're pitching it. So we're at the beginning. We're at the beginning of that. But all told,
work in progress.
Yes, all told though. Congrats to Brad Marchand on 1,000 NHL games. Connor, what can the people look forward to from you at the Globe and Boston.com?
Yeah, we're going to have you covered every step of the way this season, whether it's recaps, features, columns, all that good stuff. We'll obviously be ramping up some stuff ahead of the trade deadline as well, so you can find all that over at Boston.com and the Boston Globe. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. Bruins Beat listeners, have a great rest of your week.